How's it going, everybody? It is Wednesday, April 16th, and you are watching or listening to Tide Pod, a podcast presented to you by Tide Illustrated. Starting off, addressing the elephant in the room, I am not Jack Knowlton. I am Henry Sklar. Jack obviously left to take a new opportunity off in Iowa. He's going to be a play-by-play broadcaster there, but I'll be taking his place here on Tide Pod. As always, I'm with Tony Sikalis here today. Tony, how's it going?
It's going pretty well. Just living life after spring camp, we still got a lot going on, right?
Yeah, it's always busy. College football never really sleeps. Once you think spring's over, boom, portal opens, and there's always stuff going on. It's crazy. So, yeah, we have a lot to talk about today. Like I just said, the spring wrapped up. Alabama held their A-Day scrimmage, or not so much of a scrimmage anymore, last Saturday, and the media and the fans in attendance got to see Alabama run through a 2-ish hour practice, and then some fans had the opportunity to meet some players and get some autographs after. Tony, what it kind of reminded me of, I was just thinking, kind of reminded me of when we were down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. You
A
have
little
half
bit,
of the
yeah.
you have half of the media watching the O linemen on one side, half of them are doing nothing, and then the other part of them are watching the receivers and the one-on-ones. You have any general thoughts on the new format? Did you enjoy it?
I will be honest, okay, just for the listeners out there, we split it up. So Henry, you watched, I think, mostly the transfers.
Mm-hmm.
I pretty much kept my eyes exclusively on the quarterbacks, and we had Jack look at the freshmen. Now, I mean, everybody's in front of us. We all saw the whole field. So if something happened, a lot of times we'd notice it. But I spent most of my time looking at the quarterbacks. I guess, first of all, my biggest takeaway from this whole thing is there was a lot more actual football that was being played than I was maybe expecting. When I heard practice, I kind of thought, oh man, there wouldn't be a ton of, I thought Alabama would probably try to hide a lot of things and not really show the public much. And then I think we got like an 11 on 11 and they only ran what did it seem like maybe 10 plays out of that. And I thought,
Yeah,
oh, great.
yeah.
Yeah, at the beginning of practice. And I thought, oh, great. Is that all the 11 on 11 we're going to see? But we actually saw, plenty of 11 on 11, some 7 on 7, which was kind of fun in its own right. So I thought we got to see a good amount of football. Me just watching the quarterbacks, I will say that I'm not surprised, and we'll get to this later, but I'm not surprised that Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer named Ty Simpson as the leader in that group. I think they're all three talent, three quarterbacks, Ty Simpson, Austin Mack, and Keelan Russell. They're all talented, but when you look at who has the most command of the offense and who's not going to make the mistakes and who really looks the most comfortable out there,
Yeah,
I think
for
Ty
sure.
Simpson. Yeah, here's the thing. Did Ty make the flashiest throws? No, but he did exactly what you need a quarterback to do. And I think it kind of spoke volumes about where he stands in the quarterback battle. I think you see a guy like Austin Mack, he's kind of playing catch up to Ty right now. And I think because of that, he's, and it's not helping him, but he's forcing throws. And I think you'll see Austin Mack make some nice throws, but you'll also see him try to force the issue and throw into a pocket that he shouldn't throw into. And, that resulted in an interception. During the 8-day practice, we've heard through sources that he's thrown interceptions, during the scrimmages as well. I think it comes from him trying to force the issue, and that comes with the lack of experience that he has in-game experience. And then Keelan Russell, same kind of thing. I think it's consistency with him. I think if you just took a highlight clip of probably what from based on what I've heard and based on what we saw in practice, I think maybe Keelan Russell would have the best highlight clip. But then again, there's that inconsistency. There's those freshman interceptions. And is that something you really want to go with, in terms of giving you the best chance of winning a game right now? I think Keelan Russell is a great quarterback, and I think he has the highest ceiling of all the three of them. I think he's a special talent, the way that Bryce Young or Tua Tagovailoa or somebody of that ilk is. But yeah, like I said, I think that my biggest takeaway would probably be just I think they got it right with Ty Simpson for the time being. We'll see how that progresses. We'll see how Austin Mack and Keelan Russell do over the summer and what they look like in the fall. But for right now, I think Alabama made the right choice in naming Ty its leader.
Yeah, one thing I'll say, circling back to the format, is when you're not just focusing on quarterbacks like I was focused on all the transfer players. sometimes it's very hard to find certain guys you're looking for from where the press box is positioned in the stadium. Like
Sure.
it was pretty easy to find like, Cam Calhoun, Isaiah Horton, the skill position guys because, they're only running one-on-one, so it's not like super congested to find them. But like it took me
Hey,
so long to find Kelby Collins. Maybe because I didn't know his number exactly. I
well,
mixed
that
him up
always helps, right?
3 times, but like some of those like O linemen they brought in and some of the trench players, like it took me a while to find. Like that
Yeah.
was one struggle for me for sure.
I will say we're lucky that we're not covering North Carolina. I know that they did their open practice or scrimmage and they didn't have any numbers. So I couldn't imagine doing
Yeah.
what we were doing. I guess we would only know the real skill position players at that point.
Yeah, honestly, I still enjoyed A-Day a lot, they still have a lot of the same traditions, the Walk of Champions, Tyler Booker, Jalen Milrow, the captains from last season, all four getting their hands and cleats enshrined outside of Denny Chimes. And along with, just seeing the football team for the first time in full pads for a 2-hour practice. I mean, we get access to see them a handful of times in the spring, but we haven't had that much access out of practice in a while. So it was definitely great to be there and see all that go down. But let's get in a little bit more into A-Day and talk about some of the players that we really thought stood out. If you would like to start, Tony, did any players offensively or defensively really stand out to you? I know we didn't get to vote on an MVP this year,
Yeah.
but who stood
Yeah,
out
that's
to
one
you
of the
there?
only things I guess it was always kind of fun to vote on an MVP. They used to always make you vote on an MVP and a top lineman. And those are the two
Yeah.
most random positions you're just asked to evaluate line play on a scrimmage where you're not really allowed to hit the quarterback. But I always thought that, so I guess we missed out on those two things. I think my MVP, if we were voting for it like a normal scrimmage, would have to be Isaiah Horton. He was just kind of everywhere. He's come as advertised. The Miami transfer wide receiver. He's I think he's like 6'4", 209 or 6'4", 210, something like that. He plays big too. He makes a lot of just contested catches. The one that stands out for me was actually kind of a busted play. So much for a vanilla offense on a spring game. Alabama did like a double pass where they threw it behind the line of scrimmage to Jeremy Bernard, and Jeremy Bernard threw the ball and he threw it up. It should have been picked. I mean, he threw it up. I think there was like 2 or 3 defenders in coverage, but Isaiah Horton out jumped the defense, and then I guess he ran for a touchdown after that. I'm not sure. He probably would have got brought down. I don't think anybody was really going after him, but it was still the fact that he jumped up and grabbed that ball. It kind of reminded me of geez, I'm older than you are, Henry, but do you remember Johnny Manziel at
Yes, I remember
okay,
Johnny.
good.
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me of Mike Evans and Johnny Manziel, just having a guy that can come up there and just snatch the ball out of the air. I know that's high
Well,
praise, and and Isaiah Horton's going to have to live up to that. But I really liked what I saw from him. Another guy too. If we're going to stick with transfers, Cam Calhoun is
yeah,
a
Cam
guy.
Calhoun.
He made a really good play. I forget who was in coverage. It might have
I
been.
believe I think I know what play you're talking about. I think he was in coverage on Jalen Hale. He kind of got like
Yeah.
bumped.
Okay. Yeah. In the end zone, and
Yeah.
it would have been a touchdown. It was a nice thrown ball. It was just a great coverage. He stuck with Jalen Hale the whole time. Got his hand up at the last minute and made a good play. He's working with I guess you would call the second unit on defense, but I think he's a guy that could see plenty of the field. Alabama likes to rotate at the cornerback position, so I think he's a guy that will, even if he's the backup this season, I think he'll see plenty of the field. So yeah, those two transfers, I guess I kind of maybe stole your thunder because that's what you were watching, but I guess from watching the quarterbacks, I also got to see those two players because they were quarterback adjacent.
Yeah, I guess one thing that kind of got lost in the sauce that I actually noticed today from that crazy play where Jeremy Bernard threw the pass to Isaiah Horton is that he actually caught that over Dijon Lee, which I think like that makes it even more impressive because everybody knows Lee is like what 6'4", 195 pounds. Like either him or Mincy have the longest wingspan in that secondary. So like Horton's obviously a bigger receiver, but still going up over one of the longer cornerbacks in the room and making a play like that was pretty crazy. I think that got probably the loudest pop out of the crowd that day. It was an exciting play for sure. Yeah, but Horton overall, he made a lot of great plays. I believe he beat Lee. I think it was Lee on a deep shot, and the ball was overthrown by Austin Mack. But he was constantly getting open. And my one takeaway from A-Day was, how is Alabama going to get all these guys the ball? Horton just is another level of two. They're bringing back their top two receivers. You add in a guy like Horton, you're bringing back your top running back, Jay Miller. Like, there are a lot of mouths to feed on this offense,
Yeah,
Tony.
that's a good point. I mean, like, look, a couple of days ago on the radio, Kalen DeBoer said that he pretty much, you get 3 or 4 guys the most targets. That's what he said most of the time happens in his offenses. And then he said, the rotation could kind of expand to 5 and maybe even 6. Well, I mean, 6 kind of might sound like a lot until you start looking at who Alabama has, right? So you got Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, and Isaiah Horton. Those 3 are pretty much set in stone, going to be high impact players, right? Then you got guys that are coming back from injury. I think, a Cole Adams, he might not be the sexiest name in this unit, but he is such a good, dependable slot guy over the middle. I would put him probably as my receiver number 4. I know that there's a lot of talent right here, but you've got him, you've got Jalen Hale, who was going to be a starter probably last year. He's coming back. So those 2 guys are coming back off of injury. Everyone this spring was talking about Rico Scott, who seemed to have made a surge late. So that we're now up to 6. Then you've got the 2 freshmen that both played, really great in the spring game, and also, had their moments in the scrimmages as well. Latsier Brooks was pretty much, if you put a safety on Latsier Brooks, he's burning him every single time. And there were some practice clips that were released this earlier during camp, and like same thing. And we got to see it with our own eyes during the practice as well. And then Derek Meadows, talk about Isaiah Horton's size. I think Meadows is even he's like 6'5". I think he's an inch taller than Horton, and he also contributes at that X position. So that's like 8 receivers. Oh, and then I didn't even mention Jalen Mbakwe, who's now a 5-star.
Yeah. Like, how are all these guys going to get the ball?
That I could see all like being high impact guys. Now, granted, I mean, do they all stay with the team? I don't know, but I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't. They're going to probably get creative, and then I guess some people are just going to miss out. Some people are just going to have to be patient. But it'll certainly be interesting to see how it's a good problem to have, because we'd rather have too many than too little. But you're right. That's probably one of my biggest questions on offense right now.
Yeah, and I think that's going to also be a key with whoever starts at quarterback, whether they stick with Ty Simpson, who's the current leader, or go with one of the other guys. I think a lot of the issues on offense last season, for me, the first time I really picked up on it was the Tennessee game when Jalen Milroe targeted Ryan Williams. It was over 20 times. He was throwing to him every other play. And
you need a quarterback that can really see the field a lot better in this offense, just because there's too many targets. And there's never going to be a time. I mean, I guess there's some times where Ryan Williams is going to be the guy you need to go to, but really there's enough talent on this offense that you shouldn't have to ever force the ball. There should always be someone open. I think, and
I don't have the reception numbers next to me right now, but I believe Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams were above 50 or 40 each. And then the next closest guy
easily, I bet. Yeah.
The next closest guy wasn't even over 25. It was those 2 guys were the only 2 guys that touch the football in the passing game.
Ryan Williams at 48, Jeremy Bernard at 50, and then your third highest. You want to take a guess?
Ooh, it was probably was it a receiver or a tight end?
Oh, it's a tight end. Well, that's going to give it away, but yeah. It was CJ Dupree with 21.
Yeah, CJ Dupree. Yeah, that makes. Yeah, there's a lot of guys on this offense. I think it's definitely going to be exciting to watch this year, because any of those 8, 9 guys you just mentioned might have a big play in a big game. So it's definitely going to be something to monitor. Then Cam Calhoun, actually going back and correcting myself on the play that I mentioned, Isaiah Horton burnt a cornerback. That was actually Cam Calhoun. It was transfer on transfer crime. And that was the ball. That was the ball that was overthrown. But aside from that play, I mean, Cam Calhoun just had a great day. He looked comfortable during position drills. His change of direction was fluid. His speed looked really fluid, and he made that great play against Jalen Hill that you mentioned. What really impressed me about that play was that he kind of got bumped off at the line of scrimmage and lost his step, and then was able to recover on a 40-yard pass, and obviously he got his hands to the ball at the catch point, which was super impressive to break that up. And it's kind of the same thing defensively. I wrote about it today in my article. there are so many cornerbacks on this team right now. Like you might have 5 guys by the fall who might be pushing for playing time. You have obviously your top 2 guys in Xavier Brown and Damani Jackson, who's coming back from injury. You have Dijon Lee, who Kane Womack pretty much flat out said is going to play this year yesterday. You have Cam Calhoun coming in, and then you have another guy in Chuck McDonald. I mean, how are they going to piece these guys all into one defense, or like how are they going to use
It's
them?
kind of it's an interesting like conundrum that they have at the cornerback position, because like you say that there's actually not a lot of actual cornerbacks. I think there's only 6 of them. You've got Damani Jackson, Dijon Lee, Xavier Brown, Cam Calhoun, Chuck McDonald, and Red Morgan. So there's like 6 true cornerbacks on this team, which is not a lot. But then when you look at it, like, to have, 3 deep at that position, that all players that could conceivably, we don't necessarily know about Chuck McDonald, and he's coming in late, so I would assume he doesn't see much of the field. But like the other 5, at one point, either this year or Red Morgan, early on, they were in the mix for first team, action. So I think really there's not a lot of cornerbacks, but they all are capable, and so it creates a weird situation of like, do you add, how does that translate to the transfer portal? Like, are you going to be able to keep all these guys happy? And if you don't, how are you going to bring in other cornerbacks when the guys you have are so young and good? It's an interesting scenario. I kind of wonder how Alabama is going to navigate it. Will they be able to keep everyone happy? You'd almost want to, regardless, add another guy just for depth's sake. Now, I will say that there's a few guys on the defense that could probably play both positions. You could, if you did have a cornerback crisis, I mean, Zay Mincy started his career there, so you could slot him back down there if you wanted to. It's not ideal. But yeah, I mean, it went from being a weakness, and because it was a little bit of a weakness last year and people had to play early, I think it is now become a strength. Xavier Brown too, by the way, had an interception in the scrimmage. So
yeah.
I believe it was it him or Mincy? Now, was it him or Mincy? I forgot.
I think Xavier got one.
Okay. I think it was Xavier. Yeah, that's right. So,
but Mincy's another example of a guy who, like, maybe he's not going to be like starting week 1 this year, but he's shown promise. What did he have in the ReliQuest Bowl? A pass breakup and like 7 tackles, playing in place of Malachi Moore. Then you have Keon Sabb coming back from injury. So like, how do you fit these guys?
Who we didn't mention? We didn't mention Deshaun Jones, who's rolling with the first team Huskies. He actually, I'd put him in there, and that's another thing that maybe increases the depth at cornerback. He could be a cornerback if they needed him to. He's just, right now he's playing the Husky role. And if you needed him to go to cornerback, I think maybe Zay Mincy's a guy that you could play at Husky, or Drake Kirkpatrick. He's a guy we didn't mention. I thought he had a very good spring practice as well.
And we also let him slip through the cracks on the receivers. But if you really need, you can have Jalen Mbakwe come back and play cornerback. So there's some options. There's definitely some options. But I mentioned 2 of those freshmen in the cornerback room. Chuck McDonald, obviously not here yet. Dijon Lee, though, like I said, Kane Womack pretty much flat out and said, like, he's going to play this year. He said that during his press conference on Monday. Speaking of freshmen, though, Tony, did any freshmen during the A-Day practice catch your eye?
Yeah, I think, I guess the 2, I'll go with one on each side of the ball. I'll go Derek Meadows. Just seemed like he was everywhere. Now, granted, some of it wasn't with the first team, his second team, but he's just a guy that I think if he doesn't do it this year, he's going to be a star. I like big receivers, first of all. That's always been my preference. Not even during the Alabama. It's been kind of a tough on a guy like me because I've been covering Alabama, and under Saban, you don't get to see very many of those guys. But I like your DK Metcalfs, your AJ Browns. I just like those bigger guys. Terrell Owens from back in the day. They're fun to watch, and I think he can develop. I think Derek Meadows can, at 6'5", can be a real mismatch guy, and he moves well. He doesn't play like a 6'5" guy. And the other guy, I'll say, there's been a lot of attention on Dijon Lee at the cornerback position as a freshman, but Yvonne Taylor, the son
Yeah.
of Ike Taylor. He had an interception. I think he intercepted Keelan Russell on a play. I like what I see from him. And is he going to, look, they have a lot of depth in the safety. Obviously, Keon Sabb will be back by the end of the year, or by the beginning of the year. And then you have Bray Hubbard, and we already talked about Zay Mincy. So there's a lot of safeties back there. But I mean, Taylor is a guy that could really, just based on talent and potential, I could see him maybe pushing for some, early playing time as a freshman, whether or not he just gets in a few plays in the rotation or whatever. He's a talented guy as well. This secondary is like we keep on mentioning, it really, really solid.
Yeah, keeping on your receiver theme, I think Latier Brooks, a Jersey guy, let's go. I think he really impressed me last Saturday. Obviously, I had a lot of questions when Alabama first took him, just because, like, whoa, what's his height exactly? 5'9", 5'8"? Like, that's like, I don't know. It just like rubs you the wrong way having a guy that small, but like he can make a lot of plays. Like, I feel like every time I turned my head and saw him running in the one-on-ones, he was leaving a guy in the dust because he's so quick in and out of his breaks. He's such a sharp route runner, and he's just too fast for anyone. So even at that like smaller height, smaller frame, I still think he has a lot of potential to become a dangerous weapon for Alabama in the future. And I mean, he did really have it's New Jersey, but he did really have an illustrious high school career there. I mean, I believe he won.
We kept on seeing the plays that he made in he was like a highlight like a highlight reel. I mean, like there'd always be plays on social media of him just making like insane catches. He was a guy that I remember Jack covered a lot of recruiting for us, and he would always be raving over this guy who was Latier Brooks was a solid player, but he wasn't. Is he rated a 3-star? Or he wasn't like as highly touted as some of the receivers that Alabama's brought in the past. So I was always a little skeptical, and then I'd always see these plays on social media, and I would be like, "Damn, that guy, that guy's pretty good." And then you see it, translate to year one, his first spring camp. It's been really impressive. Like I said, like he's playing in the slot, and naturally because of that, he draws a lot of safety matchups. Good luck putting a safety on him. I mean, he's just cooking them, and he's wearing that number 17. I know he's going to get Jalen Waddle comps, and it's probably not fair. We've seen other players get Jalen Waddle comps, and it just hasn't worked out. But man, he definitely, you can see where that's coming from, just with the the quickness and the agility he has at that slot position.
Yeah, for those who don't know, I'm a New Jersey native, very proudly. I lived there for like 12 years, so I'm very in tune with like New Jersey high school sports and stuff. And there's this media group up there called Jersey Sports Zone, where like they go around to different high schools and film games and post the highlights on Twitter, whether it's basketball, football, lacrosse, whatever. And at the end of every football season, they give out an award, and it's called the Zone Men Award. It's pretty much the Heisman of New Jersey high school football. Brooks won that award, so he is like a pretty prestigious name in New Jersey high school football lore. And
there you go.
If he can even do a fraction of that at Alabama, I believe they'll be very pleased with him, and they'll be very happy they went up there and got him.
I mean, Alabama's had a lot of success from New Jersey. I know that there's I know I'm probably gonna miss them when I'm like listing them out, but obviously you have Micah Fitzpatrick, Anthony Everett. I guess now you have Geno Vandemark. You have Latier Brooks, but I feel like there's another one in there. It's just been for a place that's not necessarily known for its high school football. I think you'll admit, like it's not like one of the hotbed. It's not like a.
There's some solid schools up there. Don't sell it short. Yeah. But Derek Meadows, Brooks, phenomenal freshman wide receiver duo, and they both showed their skills at A-Day. But they're going to need a guy to get them the ball if they play this fall at all. And Ryan Grubb pretty much gave us the biggest nugget that everybody's been waiting for on Monday. He pretty much said Ty Simpson's leading the quarterback battle. Not pretty much. He said Ty Simpson would start today if they had a game today. Obviously, there's not a game for, 99, 100 more days. But, Tony, thoughts on Ty Simpson being the leader in the QB race? You kind of mentioned it in your intro, but
I guess it was kind of funny that Ryan Grubb even mentioned that, because he really wasn't asked it. He kind of dropped it on us like right at the end. I feel like I think he was kind of waiting to be asked about it, and then didn't didn't get the question, he was like, well, he wanted to announce it. I think Alabama, it felt like they felt like they owed it to Ty Simpson from the job he did, because they really didn't have to do that. You know, and I know a lot of our fans on the message board kind of like didn't like that they did that, because it created, you know, I think the thought is, once you name a leader, does it create, you know, skepticism from the other two quarterbacks? And, you know, Alabama's only got 3 quarterbacks at the moment. So, you know, they
Yeah.
really can't afford to lose another one. In fact, ideally, you'd like to have 4. They had 4 last year. That's a special circumstance. It's going to be hard to keep 4 quarterbacks on your roster in today's climate. You know, it's already going to be hard for Alabama to keep all 3 of them. But you know, I think to a certain extent, though, everyone knows where they're at. I'd be hard pressed to believe that Austin Mack and Keelan Russell didn't already know that Ty was the guy. Like, they see the scrimmages, they see who's always going first. They know how they're doing. They see him not throwing interceptions. They can still have belief in their game, but I think, you know, a lot of people can see the writing on the wall. I think it's his job to lose. And the way he's playing, he's probably not going to lose it. He's not forcing throws. He's just doing what's in front of him. And that's how you keep onto a job. You know, I mean, and I don't want to make it seem like Ty Simpson's just like some run-of-the-mill game manager quarterback, because, you know, Kalen DeBoer talked about that, and he said he doesn't just want a game manager at quarterback. He wants someone that can be a playmaker. But look, Ty Simpson is a former top 100 recruit. I know he played small-level Tennessee football, and you know, the numbers he put up at the Tennessee level aren't necessarily the same as the numbers that Keelan Russell put up, in Texas's biggest classification, you know. But at the same time, yeah, I think we've seen enough from Ty to know that he has some playmaking ability. Like, he's not going to run the ball like Jalen Milroe did, but he's a guy that can move. You know, I think you can do designed runs with Ty. And then I think one of the biggest takeaways I got from the 8-day practice was he was hitting those intermediate throws and moving the ball without just moving it on a big play. You know, he wasn't just hitting the 40-yard bomb. He was hitting the 15-yard, you know, comeback route. And that's a very sustainable, you know, yeah, I think you look at last year, right? And you'd have games where, you know, Jalen Milroe was amazing and then games where he was terrible. I think that comes a lot from not being able to read the whole defense and hit some of those intermediate routes. And that's something that Jalen struggled with at times. I think Ty Simpson being able to do that's going to not only, you know, sustain his success, but also open things up for the rest of the offense. And I think you're going to see maybe less of the big time plays, but still a few of those. And I think you're going to see, you know, just more balance and more success with the offense if it moves the way we saw it, you know, move during the 8-day practice.
Yeah, Ty, I think it's very interesting to just look at the 3 candidates for the QB job right now as a whole, like from where they started. You know, Keelan, obviously, like you said, crazy numbers, biggest classification in Texas, you know, top ranked guy. Like, probably there's an argument to be made that he's one of the more valuable names on Alabama's roster from like an NIL standpoint. You have that. Then you have Ty Simpson, you know, the guy who's been at Alabama for 3-4 years, knows the program, like respects the tradition and the standard of the program, has been around like great former Alabama QBs and wants to make the program great. And then you have Austin Mack, who's like Kalen DeBoer's guy. You know, the whole reason he went to Washington is to be Michael Penix's replacement, to be that next Kalen DeBoer quarterback. And then everything changes once Nick Saban retires, and now he's in Alabama, potentially going into his 3rd collegiate season, not as a starter. But yeah, I'm not at every practice, so I don't know like what Ty's doing, but I think you made a lot of great points there. Going back to last year, the game that comes to mind is the Wisconsin game. I remember right before halftime, Alabama had like a 2 plays that were both like 40-yard plays to score right before halftime against the Badgers. And that was great. Obviously, you know, they got points right before the half, but I think you saw more of that and less of Alabama having, you know, controlled, sustained drives, you know, milking time off the clock, controlling the game. And if that's what Ty can do, which he showed a lot in the 8-day practice, you know, hitting the underneath, hitting the crosser routes, just moving the sticks, taking it one play at a time. I think that could bode very well for Alabama.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, we talked about the secondary, and I think this defense is still going to be really strong, but having a guy that can kind of, like you said it, like, sustain some long drives when you have to, or, when you do get into situations where it's, 3rd and 7 and you need to do an 8-yard pass to move the chains. I think that's, you need a guy that can do that. And so, yeah, I think Ty could be that guy, but then again, he's not necessarily the starter just yet. And I think that, I could see it with all three guys. I could see Austin Mack developing into that guy once he settles down. And then obviously, I could see Keelan Russell being it as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes, and how that all plays out. If they're able to keep all three of them as well. But I think they will. I think they'll be able to.
Yeah, I mean, like we mentioned when we were talking before the show, quarterback could end up being a sneaky portal need for them if they lose one of these guys. Maybe Austin Mack sees what Ryan Grubb said the other day and says, I don't see a path to me becoming the starter this year, and I'm about to be a redshirt sophomore in my 3rd season. I'm eligible to go to the NFL after this year. I want to try to go start somewhere. Do you think there's a chance that could happen? Like, what do you think would have to happen for one of those two guys not named Ty Simpson to enter the portal?
Yeah, I think they did a good job of keeping the door open for each quarterback. I think Austin Mack, the read I got from his camp, just from talking to people close to him before spring camp, was that if he felt like he was going to be like the backup guy, that he would still probably be patient enough and wait. And I think at that point, you probably wait to either see what happens with Ty Simpson, whether or not, maybe he fizzles out, or if he does really well, then he goes to the league after this year, and then you try your luck next season. I still think that's probably the case with Austin Mack. I think the only thing I think that could prompt him to leave would be if he somehow felt he fell behind Keelan Russell. And I don't know if he's going to feel that way. I think in terms of potential, I think you could make that argument. And there were definitely times where, when we were watching on Saturday, that maybe it looked like Keelan maybe has a higher ceiling. That being said, I think Mack has a really high ceiling too. But at the same time, like, it was Mack that was getting most of the first team reps. And so he's got to feel good about that. I think that's probably enough. And, all these guys have confidence in himself. So I'm sure he's going to go, really focus into the summer and try to come out guns blazing in the fall to try that, to try to earn that first team role. We'll see. I don't think he's going to leave. And I don't think Keelan Russell is going to leave either. Although, there's a caveat with all these guys. If, you never know. I mean, if somebody's just going to throw crazy numbers, crazy things happen in the portal. If somebody throws $5 million at Keelan Russell, I can't guarantee, I don't know if anyone would stay for that. So, it's been crazy in the portal season. But as far as quarterback's concerned, I think Alabama's going to stand pat and hold on to all three guys. But, if not, then they'll probably have to bring in just kind of like maybe a journeyman veteran guy that can kind of just serve as depth. Let's say Mack did go somewhere, right? I think you'd probably bring in a veteran and then go Ty, and then as your definite starter at that point, and then have Keelan and that veteran kind of battle out for the number 2 role.
Yeah, and if your original point, if Alabama does stay pat, if that happens, we're going to cover another quarterback battle next offseason between Keelan Russell and Austin Mack. That would be absolutely crazy. I mean, I couldn't even begin to imagine what's going to happen if that's the case.
I think you might have one regardless. I mean, here's a situation too, Henry, that it's kind of a good situation. Like, what if Ty Simpson does super well, and let's say he doesn't win the title necessarily. Let's say he has a season, and I've kind of compared him to Will Howard from Ohio State. Let's say he has a Will Howard-esque season, a good season, and let's say Alabama gets bounced in the semifinal. So, I mean, that's a solid season, right? You go far, you get to the Final Four, and you just don't get the job done. And then Ty comes back. He elects not to go pro. What do you do then? Because, theoretically, at that point, Ty Simpson still gives you, as a returning starter, the best chance of winning but you might lose out on a potential, you know, Hall of Fame type player. It would be very similar, possibly to a Jake Fromm, Justin Fields situation at Georgia, where you have a guy that you know is good enough to win you games and is doing really well, but then you have maybe possibly a generational talent waiting in the wings. It'd be interesting to see how that, you know, progresses. I mean, like I said, I think that's a good problem to have, because at that point, you know, you at least know that you have a starter and Ty Simpson. But we'll just have to, that's kind of counting our chickens before they hatch. Well, let's Ty Simpson win the job, and then let's see how he does. But yeah, there's a million you know, interesting scenarios that can stem from this.
Yeah, this quarterback competition is just absolutely crazy. But like you said, which is also crazy, is the transfer portal. I don't even know what's going on in the transfer portal anymore. There's just players entering left and right, NIL deals being thrown at certain players, and NIL deals not being thrown at certain players, it seems now. But the portal opens tomorrow officially. Players can
Well,
officially,
today, because
start.
it's yeah, we're recording this on
It's
a
Wednesday.
Tuesday. Yeah,
Yeah,
it actually opens up today. So as you're
it opens up
listening
when
on a
you're.
Wednesday, it is
Yeah,
open.
you're listening, hopefully you have the Rivals app downloaded and you're getting a bunch of notifications about players entering the portal.
Do
Tony,
you
what do you
have the
think
Rivals app?
Alabama's? I do have the Rivals app. Yes.
Does it work?
Sometimes the text gets like bunched up, but
Yeah,
if you like,
I was gonna say we get so much, not to you know, to crap on the company here, but we do get a lot of crap for the for the Rivals app. So I was just, you mentioned the Rivals app, I was like, wait a minute, is it up now?
the
But yeah,
notifications work great. The notifications do
okay,
work great.
there, okay, good, okay,
Um,
great.
but Tony, Alabama has a very interesting portal cycle coming up these next 10 days or so. So how do you think they're going to attack this? What do you think they're going to target? And could we see any roster attrition here? Like, are there guys you expect maybe to enter the portal? What are your overall thoughts?
I hate to like predict people to leave, you know what I mean? Like, because I don't want to speak for anybody. As far as targeting, you know, I think Alabama would probably. It's interesting at the tackle position. Look, like Olis Alanin did a good job, you know, or he grew into the position. Like, I think he's, from what I heard, he struggled a lot at first in some of the early scrimmages, but then worked his way, kind of grew up in making that switch from guard to left tackle, you know, in replacement of Caden Proctor, who will be back in the fall. So like, it kind of depends, like, how do you feel about him as a left tackle? I think that Alabama probably would like to bring in a tackle that maybe won't start, but, you know, could start and you know, be that kind of swing man. Not, you know, they don't necessarily need like a 5-star dude, but maybe a guy that they feel a little bit confident in being able to step up right away. If, let's say, like a Wilkin Formby got hurt, or if Caden Proctor, I mean, Caden Proctor's dealt with injuries the last 2 years. So, you know, like, you know, this, if he gets hurt, possibly, you know, I think you'd want more of a stable option. That being said, I mean, it did sound like they were pretty positive about the job that OS has done. And then also you've got 2 freshmen on the second unit this spring. You got Jackson Lloyd at the left tackle position and Michael Carroll at the right tackle position. Carroll, kind of like Olas, I think you'd probably want, I think his future is at guard, even more so than Olas. And so I think you probably want to bring in a tackle too, so that, you know, you can kind of bump Carroll back to guard, and that gives you more depth at the guard positions too. That's definitely a spot I think they'd look to add. Like we said before, it wouldn't hurt, in my opinion, to get another cornerback. Like, once again, like, you don't want to, like, you're already trying to keep people happy at that position, so maybe they don't need it. I think that might be a spot where they get some attrition as well. Like, is that a spot that, you know, like a Red Morgan, you know, and I don't want to speak for him, but, you know, I did a projected depth chart on Tuesday, and Red Morgan was a 3rd teamer. And this is a guy that, like, we thought could maybe start last year, you know? And so, like, is he going to look at that? And, or a team's going to look at the, like, you know, how crowded. I don't think teams are looking at Tide Illustrated's depth chart, but I do think they're looking at how crowded Alabama's secondary is, and maybe making some overtures, or making it, you know how things get out. There's always a little bit of tampering, and I think, you know, there might be some persuasion for some of those players to enter the portal at positions that are crowded. I think edge rusher is another one too. You know, look how many quality edge rushers Alabama has. Could, you know, one of those players be tempted to be the, you know, to make it in the portal, to test the waters at least? I mean, you look at a guy like, I keep on hearing great things about him, and I don't think Alabama is going to let him leave. But, you know, a Keon Keeley, right? You know, he's a 5-star kid that, you know, has really yet to see the field. It looks like the light kind of switched on for him this offseason, and I think he could be on the cusp of a breakout season. But he's a guy that, you know, might test the transfer waters. A Yanzi Pierre, another 5-star kid that's never really hit it or hasn't hit it big yet at Alabama. Like, do one of these guys kind of, yeah, are they swayed by another team? Do they just, you know, try to test the waters? Could they get a better NIL deal? It'll be interesting to see. But I think at the current moment, Alabama has, like, it depends on how you count it. And I know that there's ways around with NIL to kind of create scholarships, but we have Alabama, I think, like, unofficially at 82 scholarships, and the SEC limit's 85. So theoretically they have 3 spots. I think they could finagle it a few ways. One spot too, I'll mention is punter. You know, you have Alex.
Yeah, I was about to say special teams is
punter,
a spot that like is
he's
flying
with an ACL injury. He might be back, but do you want to trust the freshman coming off an injury? And then they already brought in a preferred walk-on in Blake Dowd from Colorado Mines, but he struggled this spring from what we've heard. And so it'll be interesting to see, if they like what they've seen there, or maybe they want to add another punter. So, that's another spot I think I'd circle right there.
Yeah, I can't remember right now if it was the spring or the winter window last year, but they brought in Graham Nicholson, obviously. I mean, they've already gone in after special team guys. I was just thinking, like, that's really kind of a position you never know with. Like, you never know who they might feel comfortable with. And if there's a guy in the portal who has the pedigree of a guy like Graham Nicholson had, I mean, obviously, I don't think
They supposedly, according to Graham Nicholson's old coach, they tampered. So maybe they can tamper again and let it be known that, maybe there's a punter. I don't know. I haven't looked at the punter scene, but maybe, I don't know. Does like Fresno State have a great punter that they could just like maybe coach? And I'm just pulled that team out of thin air, but yeah.
Nicholson obviously arrived to Alabama with like sky high expectations last year. He was the best kicker in college football for the Redhawks the year before. So maybe there's another guy like that in the portal this year where they'll go after and all of a sudden bolster their special teams unit heading into the fall. Back to your point on the offensive line, though, I just think you're right. They need to add a guy maybe who could just help them be more consistent. When you look at like advanced stats and grades, like Alabama kind of graded in the middle of the pack in both pass and run blocking last season, but they had huge swings in between games. Like some games they would be one of the best teams in the conference. The next game they would be terrible and like just let up a bunch of pressures, a bunch of sacks. They need to be more consistent than keeping it short. Like you said with the cornerback spot, kind of like you talked about with the left, the left tackle position, bringing in a guy who can kind of swing around and just be there and be a veteran, another consistent guy. Maybe that's what they needed at the cornerback position. Like you said, it's tough to keep everybody happy in this day and age. So maybe they'll just bring in like more of a journeyman type player who can provide them some more depth and just be an option if things go bad like they did kind of last year on the injury front.
I think that's probably dependent on losing. I don't necessarily think they'll add a cornerback on second thought, but I do think that they'll replace a cornerback if they lose one. So, and if one of those guys leaves, I think you do bring in a journeyman type of guy. And then if not, I think they're probably set with where you're at, but it's going to be hard to keep everyone. So I think you probably might end up needing to replace one of them. Sure.
Yeah, it's going to be a very exciting portal window to watch, though. Maybe Alabama, Tony, do you expect them to have more of a busy window or a quieter window? Do you think they're going to go after any big names in the portal, or what do you expect?
Yeah, I don't think they have a need that would require them to make a big, splashy, like, addition, right? I don't really know where it would come at. I expect them to. I think it'd be good to get like that experienced tackle, and maybe you can get a guy that's like well respected. Maybe you can get somebody from a small school that like put up big numbers at a small school, like good blocking numbers. I mean, I'm sure they could find someone that did pretty well at PFF grades or whatever, but I don't think that person's going to necessarily be a marquee name. Another position we talked about we didn't talk about at least, would be tight end, but like, I don't expect them to bring in like this. Is there a big time tight end out there on the market? And I don't necessarily think that they would do that. I really can't see the position that they'd bring in. I mean, like, a position that they might need like a superstar at would be edge rusher, but they've got like a million edge rushers. So bringing in an edge rusher doesn't necessarily make sense. You probably just have to develop with what you got. I don't see a big name guy, unless I guess maybe if Alabama loses a big name guy and then it has to like replace. But I don't see like a big name addition, because I don't really know where the need would be.
Yeah. But aside from Alabama, of course, like I've said a lot, there are a lot of other big names in the portal to watch, and NIL just makes college football crazier and crazier. Tony, do you have any parting thoughts before we start wrapping up, or?
I think now it's just time to buckle up and kind of wait and see. I'm excited and halfway dreading having to cover all these, because I'm sure that there's going to be plenty to cover, and there's going to be a lot of we're in the time of the season where I have to take my computer everywhere I go, to the grocery store, to walking the dog. I have to have it close by, because you never know when somebody's going to jump in the portal. But it's always interesting to follow. So I half dreading it, half anticipating it, a little bit in between.
Yeah, like I said at the beginning of this episode, kind of, you think, you can relax for a little bit. The spring season is over, but no, it just ramps up. We have transfer portal, NFL draft, the recruiting cycle starts to heat up with summer camps beginning in a few weeks and all that. It's a crazy time. It's a crazy time. It's busier than most fans would expect. But Tony, anything else?
I think that's it, man.
Yeah, well, appreciate you guys tuning into this episode of Tide Pod. Stay tuned to TideIllustrated.com and Rivals.com for all the updates, and we will be back soon. Appreciate it.